Hey, everybody. Happy Wednesday. We're live for another Masterclass session. Today, we're going to be showing power users how to create isometric battle maps using the fantasy regional style. So we're going to be covering important concepts such as how to come up with a theme or a layout or a sketch concept, how to establish scale, how to create a certainty of functionality, and we're going to do environmental storytelling as well as a lot more. Hey, Nimue, aka glad that you are both here. Super exciting. I really have been looking forward to this stream. I greatly enjoy isometric battle maps. They're clearly not as functional as perhaps a top-down traditional orthographic battle map, but they can be functional if you know how to put them together right and if you know how to play them correctly as a DM. There's always these special rules and things that are kind of involved. So we're going to cover some of that here in today's stream. Now, I've got a bunch of them already set up here. I downloaded a couple of these for my profile, and we'll kind of just go over these just to kind of give you an idea of like what exactly you can create with Fantasy Regional, because an isometric map is kind of specific. It follows some very specific rules about angle and things like that. So we'll kind of cover that, but there's a lot that you can make. There's no real limitation to what you can make with the tool with just a little bit of creativity. So we'll be covering how to make each one of these. What would be great from people who are watching if they could come up with like a theme or a concept. And if you're not sure how to come up with a theme, generally I will just scroll through the catalog and just look at the pack structure and just look at the packs and say, okay, I can go with, I have a orc pack, I have a gothic horror pack, I have this pack. And so that's a great way to like come up with a theme instead of trying to figure it out on yourself. So if you scroll through the catalog, you see a certain pack and you say, oh, I want to make something orc oriented or elven oriented. At least you'll know that it's available in the catalog when you go to make the map. So it's always helpful to go through the catalog so you can verify like, hey, is this actually doable? This isometric design that I have in my head are the assets within the tool. So going and looking at the pack structure is a great way to kind of look for the concept. I'll let you kind of decide that in the chat, or we can recreate any of the maps or that you see here that we're going to go through. So any of those is fine. So you can discuss it among yourselves or just spitball some ideas. I don't mind. I like it all. So we've got like some orc themed ones, like a kind of a maze-like setup. Another one, kind of a crystal-like maze. You can also make interiors. We've done an entire stream for interiors, isometric interiors, and that did pretty well. So we probably will make those into series, because one of the things that I noticed is that I keep just naming all the streams isometric battle maps or whatever. But what we could do is just make it a regular, kind of add it into our regular schedule. We're just once a month. We always make one isometric battle map, and I'll make sure to label that. So let's go ahead and roll with that. I kind of like that because there's something wonderful about isometric maps with the different angles, and it kind of gives a little bit more depth to it. While with a lot of orthographic top-down battle maps, there does seem to be a lack in depth, right? Because if it's orthographic, it doesn't show any vanishing points or anything like that. So it can be a little bit more difficult to do. So I see some ideas in here. We've got like a theme for about a Fey courtyard and an Aetherpunk. I like both of them. I'm not familiar with what an Aetherpunk is. You could very briefly describe what that is. I've not heard of that, but it sounds interesting. For now, I might go with Fey because I'm a little bit more familiar with what a Fey concept looks like than Aetherpunk. Yeah, I knew there'd be a Team Fey in there. Oh, magic and merging tech. Ooh, now those are definitely we could do a battle map that has both. Like on one side, you have like an emerging magic and tech, and then versus the old magics of old, the Fae. So we could do that. One side of it is, think of it as like a duality between the magic and tech, and then the Fae. So that will give us a nice theme. We really like that. So we have a concept, and then from there, we'll have to cover scale, the functionality, and the environmental storytelling. Yeah, this is going to be fun. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and create a new map. I'm going to go to Fantasy Regional right here. It's about the fourth one down. We're going to choose the style. I'm going to go with Ultra 4K because I really like to have that nice editing resolution. Yeah, I like the Fey Court. Okay. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, right, Dead Max? So we'll go ahead and for now, we'll just call it Isometric Battle Map for now, since we're still kind of undecided for the theme. But let's go ahead and get the canvas set up because you need to know a little bit about the canvas, and you have to do a little bit of pre-planning and setting things up, as always, before you putting it down. So first thing you want to do is you're going to want to turn the grid on. That's going to be extremely helpful because the grid is isometric itself, true isometric as well. It's not like partial isometric. It's true isometric. So you're going to be using that grid as basically a guide for when you place down stamps. So you can stick it within isometric. One of the things I can mention is it's okay if some things are not following the line work perfectly. What you want to do is first establish the isometric look with walls and things like that. And then once you've established that, you can start breaking away from isometric a little bit, because this is what makes the map a little bit more interesting when you kind of break away from that graphical projection, whether it's some location on the map or whatever, that will contrast. So now when you're deciding the scale, this is about what your battle map is, what's going to be going on there. So for a lot of regular like top-down orthographic battle maps, I've noticed that they're not very massive. That doesn't mean that there isn't, but they're generally fairly small, right? Players don't want to have to backtrack. They don't want to travel all the way across the battle map to get to one location and then go here, or there's no combat going on. They have to keep walking until they get to the combat. And so these are questions that you're going to want to ask yourself when you're setting the scale. So for me personally, if I'm making like a broad region in which the players might be doing multiple sessions, they might be exploring, there's even some backtracking, but maybe some kind of quick travel system like summoning circles or whatever that might exist, or using a spell or something like that to go back to previous locations, that's all acceptable. But just know that, the smaller, I've kind of noticed that when you kind of bring it to a smaller space, a smaller area, it generally works a little bit easier. Because if you have a much smaller grid or a bigger grid, let me go to 80 so you can see what it looks like. Go ahead and change the grid settings here. There's that grid. I'll go ahead and turn off the shadows as well. I'll kind of show you. It's kind of easier to see this way. And I'll also bring down the thinness. One thing I love to do is just bring down the width so that this way I still have it, but it's not so dominant. So I can see it there. The width is really down. So I normally would stick with just the standard 40 by 30. This gives you lots of room to work with. Each one represents 5 feet, so you have it's a fairly large battle map. You could go with something even larger than that by doubling the amount and going to 80, and you would have a much larger region. But considering that we have limited time, we're going to go with just 40 by 30. So that'll give us tons of room to work with. And now that that's set, that's good. And I'll go ahead and bring that layer all the way down to layer 5. So that way it's there. And what we picked is we're going to go with Fey Court, I think, because the Aetherpunk is one that I'm not familiar with. So there's not a lot of images in my head for references to make it. But Fey is a little bit more simpler. So if no one minds, hey, thank you for the raid, Human Gamma Bomb. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. All right, so we're going to go with a Fey Court. So just some really important concepts that I want to talk about first before we jump into actually making it is I want to talk about how to make it functional. So I'm going to do a real quick brief presentation, and what I'll do is I'm going to take a ruin and I want to talk about how to make a isometric battle map functional, because this is the part where I think people might be a little confused. So you notice right here that this stamp right here, for the most part, is pretty isometric. It follows to the grid pretty well. But one thing that you'll notice is that there is something in front, this piece right here of the wall right here. This piece of the wall, let me go ahead and change this so you can kind of see it better. But there is this wall piece right here. And you'll notice that that wall piece hides some of the grid behind it. And then it loses its functionality. Right? Because now your players can't really, when they go to play on the map, they're going to be walking as if they were on top of it when you want them to be behind it. So one of the big tricks about this is that you want to make sure that the things that are tall, obstruct the view, need to be in the back, while things that are in the front need to not be obstructing the view of your players in the front. I hope that makes sense. For instance, if it was an interior, you would show the back wall, that's this wall right here, while you would hide that foreground wall like this. Okay, so let me show you how exactly I would do that here, just so you can get an idea. But what I would do is I would fill this up with the add mode of the mask tool. Just go fill. And then you could simply just hide this right here by going over to the shapes, go over to turn stroke off, fill, and then turn it to clipping mask, go over to brush. And then what I'll end up generally doing is I'll turn that blur on as well. Let's get a nice good blur. We're going to go up a layer. You want to make sure that it's above, and I can just hide this segment just like this. And if you want, you can hide the shadows too. There is quite a bit here. Let's hide these shadows and stuff. There you go. So now this part of the map becomes much more functional because this part of the wall is now gone. If it was there, then it kind of blocks the view. So it's a nice little trick to kind of help you. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't have things in the foreground layer. That's fine. If you want to have things right here, that's okay. But what you don't want them to be is something large like this that obstructs the player's ability to be able to obstruct their movement. So that's kind of a super important thing when you're making an isometric battle map, is this functionality of things that are tall should be in the background, while things in the foreground should be short enough not to obstruct the view. Okay, so not complex, pretty easy stuff. So now that we've set that together, you notice that it's just a lot more functional, right? So that's a big trick there that I've learned that's going to be very, very helpful. Okay, so now that we've gone over picking a scale, the concept, and the functionality, we can start putting it together. And the way that I start this out is by creating a centerpiece. And a centerpiece doesn't mean that it's perfectly centered. Like if I look right here, when I put something directly in the center like this, there's common in art principles not to have your center point be directly in the center. What's always nice is just to offset it just a little bit to the left, to the right, up or down, to the corner, just a little bit of offset, because when it's perfectly centered like that, honestly, I just don't think it's nearly as appealing. This is a personal preference of mine as an artist, but you don't have to follow that principle. But I think offsetting is just a little helpful there. Now, since we picked a Fae theme, it's not too complex what kind of centerpiece we should be choosing. There's a lot of options here. We can create a large stump. That way it's cut off and it's not blocking anything in the center there. We could create a well of sorts, like a well of souls, all the spells, all the wells of the Fae spirits and whatnot. The show what's underneath, that is totally possible, but let's save that for another stream, because that one is a whole other beast to tackle, trying to do like dungeons underneath and stuff. And we do have, I'm guessing you mean dungeons, right, Kayfae? There is a whole stream, and there might be a couple of them on isometric dungeons, if that's what you're talking about. So yes, there is a whole series of streams on isometric battle maps when it comes to dungeons. Those should be on YouTube. They're probably a little bit longer because they're a little bit older, but they should still be helpful nonetheless, okay? So definitely check those out, or we can just create a new one. So what I'll end up doing here is I'll go into the catalog and I can kind of look for interesting things to kind of work. And I think, I like these fountains right here. We could do something special with a fountain, maybe add some shrubbery on it, overgrowth. We could even throw in like maybe a large like crystal heart that's like the heart of the Fae, and then we can have some vines kind of traveling from the heart and then kind of traveling outward. So we should definitely pick like a centerpiece. And for right now, we'll just pick this as the centerpiece. And I'm going to stick with this grid size. I think this looks good. And you'll notice that it matches with the isometric grid. So I'll go ahead and place it. Now that I have a centerpiece, I can start framing the map. And by framing, what I mean is that I can start placing stamps. They're going to go around the edges that are kind of frame the centerpiece. And there's a lot of different ways that you can go about this. You can use mountains, any kind of terrain, cliffs, whatever it might be. I usually start with a terrain stamp first, and then I can start building on top of that. You should know that whenever you're building a map, you should always build from the ground up. That means start with your terrain, start with your using stamps that represent hills and mountains, and then you just start stacking on top of each other. It would be weird if you started doing the building first without adding the landscape first? How is it that you decide? How is it that you decide, right? Yeah, there's a lot of goodies in there. This is from the Classical Empire style. I'll go ahead and share these with you a little bit because they're super nice. Right here, Classical Empires, 821 assets. There's quite a bit. I'm super excited about this one, and we are definitely going to be doing some isometric battle maps with these once these are released. So I'm super excited about that. So what I'll do here is I'm just going to type in mountain, and I think I'll go with green. It kind of fits with the theme a little bit, but it doesn't. We can also change the hue at any time because it does have a green color. We can change the hue. And what I'll do is I generally start by just adding a little bit of mountains or whatever your terrain is, and just go into the corners and start there first. Let's go up here, start a little corner. Let's go here. Let's add one here. The trick is that you just don't want to have this right here. You see what this does? Remember, this blocks your player's movement. They can't see, and it's going to look odd, right? They're going to block on top of it. So we'll go ahead and place a couple of these. You can make them more, you can make the corners more pronounced. And basically, like I said, what we're doing is we're framing it so that way there's this open kind of glade or clearing in this area in which we can have this. And I'll go ahead and bring this size down. This is quite a large fountain here. I'll go ahead and set a scale here. Let's go with here. That's about a decent size for a fountain. We can go with that. We'll change it as we go. So we're framing things. We'll go ahead and adding these. This looks good here. Just want to set this up where we get the frame. Let's go here. Right here looks good. Let's put it right there. Okay. I think for the most part, this looks okay. We'll probably add more as we go. This would be more close to center. We want to maybe move it this way, just a hair. What's beautiful about the offsetting is that you don't have to make it way offset. You can still have it very close to center. Just move it just a hair over, just a little bit. And even though it might not be noticeable, it still looks good. So definitely do that offsetting. So I kind of like these green things right here. This works really good. Why don't we start adding some stuff to the centerpiece? What I'll end up doing is changing the hue of this. I want to go with like an interesting color. I kind of like this blue and red. This kind of has like a wine or a Merlot-like color to it, or maybe a blush like wine. So I think that looks good. Why don't we also put a heart on top of that? We'll go to Fantasy Battle Maps. I'm going to let that load just real quick. And there should be this really nice heart stamp. It's got crystals on it and stuff. Let me type in heart. Oopsie. Heart. Not my heart. Hold on a second. Here we go. This one right here. I think this is going to be really, really nice. I like this piece. I think it looks good. Why don't we just place it right there onto the center there? I think that looks good. We'll go ahead and go none like this. And we'll maybe bring the size down a little bit, because one thing, again, the problem that we're encountering is that you won't be able to see things behind it, right? So I want to make sure that it's not too massive. It's okay to break the rules of the functionality, provided that it suits a purpose and that there's plenty of other room for your players to move around, right? If your centerpiece is so big that it leaves very little room for your players to move around, then this is kind of a big problem for the map. So it's always okay to try to break rules a little bit and to not have it be perfectly functional. This little section just looks nice. You'll notice that there's tons of room around it for players to move around. So if they miss out on some action right here, that's okay. If you want to have any important events or NPCs, place them in the front of the centerpiece instead of the back. And that way they won't have to interact with that part nearly as much, right? Put all the interaction points away from that back area. That way it makes it way more functional, okay? I do kind of like this color too. This is, I don't know. Something about that looks cool, but the default color I think looks best with the fountain as is. One thing I am noticing though is this is a little bit more, has a little bit less contrast to it. So to match the contrast of that heart, we'll bump up that contrast. There we go. And now we can really get that. And then we'll bring the brightness, or not the contrast, sorry, we'll bring the brightness down a little bit as well. There we go. Now it kind of matches it just a little bit better. So, and then what I'll do is I'll start adding details and decorating the centerpiece. And then that way I start flooding my history and the catalog with stamps that I can use across the map. And I'm kind of setting an overall theme and a color palette by working on the centerpiece. And then I can start branching out from the centerpiece and move my way out towards the framing areas around the ledges there, right? So let's keep adding to this. I think what might also be nice is to kind of rotate it. I don't want it facing perfectly straight. By having it rotate a little bit, I'll have a little bit that looks a little bit nicer there. And then I might want to consider adding some more things to it. Let's go ahead and turn this off and go back to Fantasy Regional. You know, I did see some other fountains. We could also stack some fountains on top of each other. That might be fun. Like, let's take this one down. One more. And then we'll kind of place that just right on top like that. I think that looks good. And I'll have to change the hue. What's this one at right here? Oh, it's all the way at the end. So we should be able to do the same thing here. There we go. Cool. Let's bring the brightness down just a little bit more. There we go. And I'll bring the brightness up on this one. There we go. Cool. All right. So we've got some of that. You know, oh, yeah. Yeah, I like that. Someone's saying instead of blood, it's very fey. Okay, cool. I like that, Jonathan. You know what? We could use the river stamp from the line tool to create blood kind of coming out of the heart and then going down into the fountain. That'd be kind of cool. And it doesn't even have to be blood, right? We could say that it's the lifeblood of the Fae, right? Like, what makes this important is this is like the heart of the Fae. So you could say that the lore here is that this is like the heart of this Fae land. And if someone's trying to destroy it or destroy the Fae, then they would go to the heart, damage it, and cause irreparable harm to the Fae area that your players are in. So that could be a part of the theme of this combat, right? The objective is either to destroy the Fae heart if your players are feeling particularly malicious, or if they're hired by maybe people from the Fae to protect the heart from invaders or whatever kind of creatures, right? So it's a good theme to add in there. Let's go ahead and go over here. We're going to go ahead and type in river. Yeah, I'm not surprised that your players would want to destroy it. My players are mischievous like that too. Oh, was that NPC important? Not anymore, right? All right, so I'll go ahead and just use the line tool here or to kind of create a little bit of a fountain here. What I'm going to do here, so one thing, I want to mention a little trick that you can do when it comes to trying to bring out a red color. I've noticed that trying to bring out reds is actually kind of difficult with the tool. One thing you could do is first bump up the saturation all the way up, and then also bump the contrast way up. This will be helpful. Then when you go to switch over to the hue, you're going to try to find a kind of a reddish color, and then when you bring the brightness down, you can really start to see that more reddish color as it starts to come out. So now that we have that reddish color, that looks good. We should also just bring the brightness down a little bit more. And so now we have this kind of nice reddish like flow. And then I'll just go ahead and create a couple of them, like maybe one that goes down in here like this. Maybe one that goes out of this ventricle right here like this. And then we'll kind of have it just kind of go into here like that. We'll have to find a way to fix that too. We'll figure out how to do that in just a moment. We'll add that one. Let's add just a couple more. Let's maybe put some in the background behind it, like this. I might have to do some layering. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do some layering here. Let's push this heart up one more time. There we go. One in the background there. And I'll also just bring the brightness down so it looks like it's in the background there. Let's go copy and paste one more. And we'll put it maybe like right there like that. Okay, so now we have some the heart of the Fae there, so I think that looks pretty good. We can add a couple other things as well. Maybe there are some important objects that keep the heart going. For instance, maybe there are these 4 magical like orbs that provide extra source of energy or whatnot. Maybe your players are trying to protect them or destroy them. You notice here that we have some nice 4 little corners like right here that we can kind of work with. Right here, oopsie, a little too big there. Right there, those corners right there look kind of nice. So why don't we place like something that your players can interact with, like an orb? So we'll go over to Fantasy Battlemaps. I don't think they're in Fantasy Regional. We're just going to type in orb. These, I think, were revised. Like here are the revised ones right here. These are pretty nice. I'll go ahead and expand so you can kind of see what it looks like. So here are the revised versions. You can see that there's a total quality difference between them. So just in case people want to be able to clone and edit this map, I won't use these, but they are absolutely beautiful. I really like them. So I'll just stick with the 1.0 ones for now. And I'm just going to put, what I should do is maybe consider creating like a little platform for the orb to sit on. So what we could do is go back into Fantasy Regional. Yeah, the orbs are very, very helpful. Yep, there's also orbs from the watercolor as well, but I don't think watercolor works. The watercolor art style works very well with Fantasy Regional because watercolor style is so tiny, or at least some of the art is. You're talking about cities, or is it the battle map style? If it's battle map style, then it could work, but there's more detail in the Fantasy Regional style, and the line work for the fantasy. The line work for the Fantasy Regional style is not quite as thick. So it could work. We'll have to try it maybe. Let's go ahead and place this down here. And I'm just going to create like a little platform or I guess you could call it a dais or whatnot. And I'm just going to place these on the corners like this, copy and paste. One here, one here. And now we have something for our players to kind of interact with. And I'll place an orb on top of each one. So we'll put maybe like a little blue orb here. It is Fey, so it's going to be lots of color, right? So we'll go ahead and put a yellow one, and then there's a green one as well. And don't forget, if you don't like those colors, you can change them with just the hue slider. So if you wanted purple, pink, or whatever, you could totally still get those colors. Yet could use skulls. I'm going to go with the colored orbs for now because I think with Fey, this is just me, but when I think of Fey, I think of a lot of color. I think of a lot of natural things. So I think the orbs will work for now. I think this overall looks good so far. We've got a theme going on. We've got the heart. We've got this. The only thing I would say that we could start to build from here is to start maybe creating some vines that travel outward, like from the heart, and then start like building into the ground. And what we could do is we could have the vines lead to maybe like some kind of like power sources somewhere that like keep the lights on, if you know what I mean. So in other words, we could have like maybe some crystals that are like mounted on or come out of a hill or in a crater, and then those crystals are connected through the vines that go to the heart itself. So that way we have something to interact with, right? So let's go ahead and do that. What I might do first is I'm going to go ahead and create this group, and we're going to call it the Heart of the Fae. In all caps, apparently. It's that important, right? Heart of the Fae. So now I have that centerpiece there. That's going to be great. Again, I'm not going to make it perfectly centered. I'll just kind of move it off to the side just a little bit here so that way it's a little off-centered. I think that's nice. And we're going to do a bunch of changes as well. You see there's a lot of color here, and there's just no color on the mountains and on the ground. Don't worry, we are going to get to that. So why don't we now choose how we want to go about the light source, the crystal thing. So I'll type in crystal real quick. And what I'm thinking is we could maybe choose these kind of crystals right here. I'll place them on the map for now, so that way they're there and I can copy and paste them. The next question is, how will I have them interact with the ground? Will they just be sitting in a crater somewhere? Will they be sitting on top of a hill? Maybe there's some maybe there's some sunken statues that are sunken in the dirt and the crystals are kind of growing on top of them. So there's a lot of different ways that we could kind of go about doing this. We could scroll through the catalog and kind of look at some things that maybe we want to use. The urge to use the classical battle map style stuff is great, let me tell you. Oh, you know what? I like the stone circle that this camp makes right here. This is really, really kind of nice. I like that circle thing. So what I might do is I might actually use it as like a piece that I can put something on top of. So I'll change the hue. We'll do a little bit of experimenting. I'll go ahead and place the crystal in the center here on top like this, and then just check to see if that looks good. Yeah, I do like that. I do kind of like the way the crystal kind of has the light glowing inside of the center of the stones. The circle kind of frames the crystal itself. So I think that looks good. We'll keep that. It is a little big, maybe making it 10 feet across. would be a good spot. And then we can kind of choose some locations for these to be. We can change the U as we see fit. Let's put one here. We'll copy and paste. Let's put another one like over here maybe. I don't want to have them all be perfectly equidistant from each other. By equidistant, I mean they're not equally distant from each other. They're going to be, maybe some will be closer than others. This will give it a much more natural look to it. If they're all equal distant to each other, it's going to create this level of symmetry that's going to look unnatural. Okay, so don't do that. And let's put one up here as well, right here. I think 4 of them is okay. And we can even adjust it to where maybe one is for each crystal, right? So there's a blue one over here. Maybe we can go to this one and then change this to a green one. And the way to do that is we'll have to do them separately. So with this one, let me try them both real quick. See if they both will change with the green. Nope, it doesn't. That's fine. We'll go ahead and change the hue. Look for that green color. Go with this one. And we'll try to find that green color. There we go. That looks good. There's one. Let's see our yellow one. Let's go with that. I think we could just go with the default hue for that to get the hue. Let's bring the saturation up to really get that yellows out. And then we'll try to get that yellow color out of here as well. Let's bump the saturation and the brightness, and then maybe I can use that to get that yellowish color. There we go. That looks good. I'm going to put this right next to this one so I can kind of get a look at it. Yeah, that looks good. We could probably bump the brightness down just a little bit. Okay, so now we have a yellow crystal. I think that looks good. Let's go ahead and move this green one over to here a little bit. Right now, see, you're starting to see now that they are a little equidistant to each other doing that. So if they do become that way, you could just move them closer to the centerpiece or further away. You could move it to here, move it further away, and that would break that equidistant thing, especially if you want to make sure that each crystal is coinciding with each orb. Let's go with right there. Let's bring this one a little bit further away, like all the way out to here. That would be kind of nice. Let's go ahead and move this one maybe over to a little bit closer, like that. There we go. And now we're not getting too close. I think that looks good. Let's also change the hue on this one, more of a reddish color. So let's go ahead and bump the saturation all the way up. That way we can really get that red color. Let's also bump up that contrast, and then we can change the hue and try to find that more reddish kind of color. I think that is about dang close, right about there. That looks pretty good. And we'll just go ahead and change the hue to get that red. And in fact, we can just use the red crystal itself. This way we don't have to play with hues if we don't want to. Right here, the red one's already there. Perfect. Let me just make sure it's at the right scale. We might change the crystals too as we see fit to different ones. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, I think that looks good so far. Let's quickly save at 154 changes, and then we'll start connecting them with vines, and then we'll start working on something a little bit different. Now that we've kind of established a theme, how the overall setup works and whatnot. So I think that looks good. And then we'll go ahead and move on to the next step, which is connecting them with vines. So we'll go into the catalog here. We'll go to Fantasy Battlemaps here, and we should just be able to type in vine. And there should be a bunch of them that we can kind of choose from. I think they're mostly from like these ones right here. There's some thorny ones right here, grasping vines, which could be interesting. Or you could use these jungle vines. Either one of them works. It doesn't really matter. I kind of like this one a little bit, but it depends how well the hue changes with it. Why don't we make a couple of them and just see how that works? Let's do this. Check this out. We'll make a couple. We'll choose one, and then I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste, and then copy and paste again. And we'll go through the different ones. So let's try this one, and then let's also try this one as well. Let's go ahead and change the scale so they're a little bit bigger. I want to be able to see them. There we go. Looks good. And then from here, I can go ahead and bring up that saturation, and I can change the hue. And just want to see how well, make sure that they don't have drastically different colors. I think overall, any of these would really work. I'm a little privy to the first one, but we could use any of them really. Okay, let's go with this one. That first one. I kind of like that one. It looks good. Oopsie. Uh-oh. Looks like I'll have to grab them this way. There we go. Okay, let's go ahead and delete these. All right, one thing I can do is I'll turn the shadow off. I'm going to turn the scale down a little bit so it's a little bit smaller. I think right about that looks good. And I'll change the hue shortly. Let's just try to figure out how exactly we want this to, how exactly we want to do this. Because there's a couple ways that we could do this. You could just have the vine just travel all the way like this, like a river, right? Where it just kind of travels its way into it. Or you could have it to where some of it is submerged under the ground and then other parts pop out. So for instance, we could have it like go pop right there and then it goes underground and then it pops back out like this. And then it goes back underground and then it goes like this. And then it connects like that. So there's a couple ways that we could approach it. I'm not sure which one looks the best. I kind of like both, honestly. I think they both work well as long as we make it clear that it is going under the ground. For instance, we might want to consider adding something like an explosion at each piece like this. We could put a little explosion right down like this, and we'll put it underneath. And then this would give it that illusion that it's kind of traveling underneath the ground. They think they should all be above ground dead. Yeah, I think they do look a little better, and it doesn't really convey it quite well. The only reason why I was mentioning it was because it could be interesting for players to like follow it, and then they they lose a little bit of it, and then they have to find a way to track it. So I think that was what I was going with for there. But I think you're right overall. It's kind of difficult to convey that it's going underneath the ground, so we won't do that. Let's turn off caps, and then we'll go ahead and put down that first vine. And remember, like I said, what I want to do is to maybe not have it go perfectly like a straight line. Let's have it kind of meander like a river and make its way to it like that. Same thing here. We'll go ahead and do this one. Let's have it kind of curve out. Let's maybe have it meander this way, all the way like that. And then it goes right there. We'll have to change it to where the crystal is above that. That's fine. There we go. That looks good. Not entirely satisfied with that, but we can always change it. So that's the beauty of it. Let's go ahead and add the next one. Let's have it maybe like curve its way like all the way over to here like this. And then it kind of just moves its way in like that. That looks good. And then we'll put another one here like this, making its way into there like that. There we go. So now that we kind of have those pieces there, we're going to want to change the color, the hue of them. I'm not so sure if I want them to be all the same color or not, or if they should be coordinated with it. We could go with like more of a bluish type of color that kind of matches with that, or we can have each individual one be a different color. Why don't we just see what each individual color looks like first, just to see what it looks like. Corresponding would be good, Alice. Not a bad idea. Okay, oops. Give it a little bit of lag there. 1 second. Okay, let's go back in the catalog. We'll change the hue. Oop, oop. Okay, let's bring the saturation up. Let's bring the brightness up, so that way I can kind of find that yellowish color. If you're kind of wondering where the yellowish color is, it's generally not far from like the green color, I've noticed, but it is having a hard time finding that color here. Ooh, I think right about there. Cool. You had to bring the brightness up quite a bit to get to it. And then we'll do this last one. We'll go ahead and bump the saturation, bump that contrast, and we could try to get that reddish color out. There we go. That looks good. Looks good. Okay. And then, all right. And some other things we could do is we could also change the blend mode of the crystal to make them more translucent. So if your players are behind them, it won't be so bad, right? So we'll go to blend modes here and we'll change them up, and we'll just kind of go through them with color, lighten. Well, I do like lighten. That looks kind of good. Let me take a better look at it. Yeah, that looks kind of cool. I like that. They are more transparent now. That's kind of cool. We could change the other blend modes just to kind of see what they look like. Screen, color dodge overlay. Not sure which one I like the most. This hard light is okay. Let's go with, I think we should go with lighten. This way I can really kind of see the stuff behind it. You can see here, I can see the rocks behind it. I can see this vine behind it. We'll have to reconnect that a little bit to where it kind of fits. There we go. Like that. We could also do blend modes as well with the vines. You know, it doesn't really hurt to try it out. We could try doing lighten like this. If that doesn't work, we can always go with screen. We can go with color burn. I think screen looks kind of the best here. You might want to consider moving this up a layer so where the vines are underneath of it. Like that. That could work. Yeah, I think I will go with that. We'll see what happens when I start adding different colors and stuff to it. Let's go ahead and start really adding in the Fey element. We've kind of added in the centerpiece and the different places that your players are going to go to. So let's start working with some Fey stuff. There's a couple ways that you can kind of approach this. You can take any fantasy regional texture and just kind of change the hue. What I like to use is ones that has a lot of artifacts. For instance, notice this grass brown right here. It has a lot of highlights, like some yellow, some brighter colors and some darker hues in it, or darker X sections. That's where you kind of get some nice contrasts in there. And so what I'll do is to pop out that contrast, I'll bump up the contrast. So that way you can really bring out those artifacts. And then I can go over and change the hue and kind of pick a color that I feel works best. And I think purple works good. So we'll do that. BG, we're going to go ahead and fill it. Oopsie, it's set to FG, my mistake. We'll go to fill. There we go. We'll change it as need be. Next, we're going to want to grab all of these mountains. You can just select one, hamburger menu, go select all from this set. And then we'll go ahead and bump up the saturation a little bit, and we'll go through the hues, and we'll try to find that purple that works out. There we go. So now we have some nice purple there that works out. We've really established more of that Fey theme. I think that looks good. We could also use some textures from Fantasy Battlemaps. There is some great textures in there. So why don't we open up the catalog, go to Fantasy Battlemaps. If I type in Fey, you'll find some really nice textures in here. For instance, you've got these Fey lights. Why don't I turn on the names so you can see them? You've got some nice Fey lights here. I think these are really good ones. They work really well. There's also these ones right here where you kind of have this kind of grass right here. And it's got a lot of artifacts in here with the darker and the lighter sections. So these work really, really well. Let's go ahead and change the scale a little bit. And then why don't we change that hue to match more with the purple? Let's also bring the contrast down a little bit, or maybe we can let's maybe bring the brightness up just a little bit. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and bring the opacity down. And then we'll just go ahead and apply some purple sections in here like this. Just go ahead and just apply a little bit here. There we go. We have little sections in here. Like this, we're adding in some purple. I think that looks good. Add some purple in here. That looks good. Why don't we also add in some other colors like green? In fact, why don't we have it to where the grass areas are different colors as they emanate from each crystal that's attached to the heart, right? So that makes sense. So why don't we just go in here like this? We'll grab this one. We're going to go and change that hue to get that bluish color that we want. Let's bump the saturation up to get that blue. It's totally understandable. It depends on the texture that you're using. Like a natural texture, I think works okay with Fantasy Regional, but when you start adding things like wood, when there's like the grain of the wood, when you start getting like tile, when you start getting into textures like that, that's when you start getting really nervous because they just don't match with the graphical projection that is isometric, right? So avoid unnatural textures like tile and things like that, okay? Only use natural textures like forest floor, fey, things like that. You don't want to use the more unnatural textures. And I'll go into the catalog just to kind of give you examples so I can show you what I mean by that. Like for instance, this wooden piece right here. When I add in that wooden texture, this simply just does not work, right? Because it just doesn't have isometric. Even if I was to rotate it, the grain of the wood, the line work would still be off. It wouldn't be isometric. So it's important to just stick with the natural ones instead. This is what I've noticed personally. So we will go with that blue. Why don't we just bring the opacity up just a little bit? And I just want to apply it. Oopsie, not that one. My mistake. We'll go back here. Let's go ahead and bring the hue up to that blue color. Let's bump up saturation. And let's also change the texture scale a little bit. I think that looks good. And then we'll just apply a little bit of the blue like this. In fact, we could even bring the brightness up. Let's maybe get it to be a little bit brighter. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, and then I also want to create some little sections, little pockets of blue as we go away. So I'll have a little dot there, a little dot here, just a little bit of dots here and there of that kind of transitioning. And now I can just take that exact same texture and I can just change the hue to fit it to the next color that I want, right? I'm going to go for maybe like that red. Remember, you bump up the contrasts to bring out the red. Because remember, red is kind of difficult to acquire. So bumping that contrast is really going to help. Let's just apply some little bumps just along here to make sure that I get that color right. There we go. Yeah, I like that. Just little clicks here and there. When you want to do blending and stuff, you're always just going to do little clicks. Don't try to do huge sweeping strokes, okay? And you always want to bring the opacity down so that way you can get the strokes looking good. All right, let's go ahead and switch over now to yellow, which might be the most challenging. I might need to bump it way up, bring the brightness way up, and let's maybe bring the contrast down a little bit. We'll have to find that yellow color, and that will be a little on the challenging side. Let's bump up the brightness. It should be a little bit easier to find that yellow that way. Bump up the brightness. Let's see here. I think that looks good. There's going to be a little bit of orange in it, but I think that's okay. Yes, great idea. I should save Typher. Great call. Let me just do this last little piece right here of adding this little color in, and we're going to save. Yeah, you could change bring the saturation down. The thing is that I don't think I'm going to get all yellow with this texture because there is those flower bits in there, and those are just not going to turn yellow, right? They're probably going to change. But I think it's okay because if you look carefully at the crystal and you look carefully at the vine, there's already orange built into it, and so it's not deviating too far away from the color. So as long as it has some yellow in there, I think it's okay. Personally, that's just me. Let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and change up the color adjustments on this one. We'll go back to default for now. There we go, because it should be a little bit easier to get green than it is to get the other ones. Let's bring that brightness up. Let's bump the saturation to really get that green. I'm matching it with the crystal. And then we'll do it again. We'll go ahead and bump that green on there. Have I ever crashed during a stream? No. I generally don't crash during streams. There are moments where, maybe a UI might glitch out or the catalog is glitching a little bit. And so I'll just have to save and refresh the page. If it doesn't let you save, then you would do an offline backup. But very rarely does it crash on me. But just know that there are things you can do when that happens. Save offline backups, things like that. It shouldn't crash on you. That could be a number of things that could cause that. It could be your bandwidth of your internet. It could be the power of your machine. It could be that you're taking too many resources on your bandwidth. There's a lot of different things. So if you do come into problems like that, feel free to go to our support and we'll help you out, okay? All right, so far, I'm actually just very kind of pleased with the way that it's overall turning out. There's some changes that I'm going to want to make. For instance, I definitely want to add a mix of natural and unnatural, right? When you see a lot of Fey maps, there seems to be like a mix between some creature-made, some unnatural elements, and natural elements, right? I think that creates a contrast. So we already have that. You notice that we have this fountain right here. Clearly that's not made. That's not, doesn't grow. Fountains don't grow. So it's a nice contrast there. The heart too. So you have some nice contrasts that work well. So we're probably going to want to add some more elements to it that are maybe unnatural. For instance, we could go to Fantasy Regional. And there are some cool textures that we could use. For instance, let me take a look here. There is this really nice texture. And I don't remember what it's from. Let me take a look and see if I can find it. I think it was crop. Let me look it up real quick. There is a really nice crop texture. Oop, maybe it's not popping up. Let me try again. No. Okay, 1 second. I got to try to figure out where this texture is because I enjoy it so much, but it is difficult to kind of find a little bit. It's got like these kind of like crop circles in it. It's kind of hard to describe. I'm trying to wonder if it's under maybe Fantasy World. There it is right here. This barren lands right here. See those cool little circular type of elements inside of it? I think it kind of reminds me of like calligraphy sand where they take rakes and stuff. I kind of like that look of those little circles and stuff. So we could apply that to the map to make it look more interesting. So we'll have to do some changes, like maybe change the scale so that the circles are a little bit bigger and they're a little bit more noticeable. And then we're going to want to change the scale or change the hue to get that more purplish color out. Let me bring the brightness down. That's a little bit on the pink side. Let's bring the purple out, bring the brightness down. And what I'll do is I'll just quickly apply it just to see what it looks like in an area. Let's maybe just apply some here. I really want to bring out, I am going to hide some of the other things, but I actually kind of like this little crop circle thing quite a bit. That looks kind of cool. Let's maybe change, it's a little too pink. Let's maybe make it a different color. Let's maybe make it a little more on the purple side. Let's maybe bring the brightness down, and let's maybe bump up the contrast to kind of bring it out. Bring that brightness down a little bit more. There we go. This should fit in more with the background more. There we go. I do really like these crop circles, so we might have these be the main texture underneath. And in fact, we can turn the grid off because it is kind of distracting a little bit. We'll turn that grid back on shortly. For now, I'm just going to just apply this. Whoops. Don't think that was meant to happen. All right, we'll go ahead and add that in here. And then we'll do some, we'll add in more in just a little bit. But I do kind of like that crop circle kind of look to it. Looks kind of nice. I might have to change the brightness on it a little bit. Yeah. Okay. So I don't want to accidentally, oopsie, I kind of overdid it a little bit and remove some of that. So let's fix that real quick. Bring the scale down. There we go. It's all part of the adventure, right? You're going to end up redoing some things and texturing some things. Okay, I think overall that looks good, but we can add some more stuff to it. Like, let's go back into Fantasy Battle Maps and use Fae. And I think what I'll do is I'll coordinate each light, like the colors, with the Fae lights around each one, like this. So I should probably try to find, let's see here, here's a green one. Let's apply this green kind of, there we go, that looks good. Now you kind of have this nice green, bright color as you would kind of expect there. Let's also do a yellow one right here. There we go. In fact, we can bring the opacity back up to 100%. That way I can really bring it out. There we go. We have some nice yellows there. Let's also go back over to the pink. And I think we're going to have to try to figure out how to get to red. That looks about right. Let's go ahead and add that. There we go. And you got some nice reds in there. Now we're going to go switch over to blue. This one right here. There we go. And now we have some nice colors there. There we go. That looks good. Yeah. Okay. So from here, I think I will try to paint around the crop circles and try to add in some of that other texture that I was putting in. Not that one, but let me see. Which one was it now? Oops. Looks like it got taken out of the favorites. No surprise, right? Let's see here. Could use this one, or we could use this purple one here. I do like that. Let's go with that one. I'm basically redoing it. So, okay, and that's okay. It happens. Let's make sure that I get that right purple out. Let's bring the scale down. There we go. And then we'll start painting in some sections around it. We'll bring the opacity down. There we go. And I'll just start painting in the sections around the crop circles. So I can start like painting in these sections right here, maybe right over there, some in here. And then this way I can still get some of those artifacts in the map, because not every single one of them has to, you have to show every single one of them. You just want to make sure that some of the crop circles really, that they do stick out a little bit. Let's go ahead and put a lot around here, around this centerpiece. That would look good. And then let's also transition the mountains with the with that crop circle-like texture. So I'll go ahead and start merging these two with each other by doing this right along these edges here. I am using a pen, but if you have a mouse, it's still doable. All along these here, we want to just get this nice merged in around here like this. There we go. Oopsie, I don't want to undo it too much. There we go. Okay, this looks good. So far, so good. I'm enjoying it. Okay, yes, after 730 changes, I think it's safe to perhaps save it, right? With so many changes. Where are we at for time? 3:54? I'm not going to worry about it. If this is too long, we'll just split it up into 2 parts. I don't mind at all. And I'm sure some of you don't mind sticking around a little bit longer now, do you? Okay, I think overall, we've kind of got it together. I think that we've put together a nice base here, and we can start putting things on top of that. We can add in details. We can start turning the grid back on. And what we could do is I do want to keep the grid on. So what I might do is change the color of the grid to maybe a different color. Like we could use like maybe a purplish color for the grid. Like maybe this dark purplish color might look good. Let me just go ahead and just zoom in real quick. There you go. Yeah, I think this purple color looks good. And now we have a sense of scale. Yep, that looks good. That looks good. Awesome. Yeah, I like this. Okay, so it is Fey. So why don't we start decorating the corners and the frame part with a bunch of Fey-like themed stamps, right? And you can use fantasy battle maps as well. They have a little bit more dramatic because there isn't an official Fey pack for the fantasy regional style, kind of lacking in that department, but that's okay because you can totally use fantasy battle map stuff, but you have to be able to warp it a little bit to work correctly, okay? Because remember, they are top down. So there are a couple options that we could do. What we could do is first, maybe we could use some of these flowers right here and put them maybe growing in the mountain sections or having them be in the corners like this. The nice touch, or we can change the hue to match to green color. There's that, or we can take stamps from fantasy regional style as well. We could also use that. Like there's these big Fey like pumpkins right here. So we could also put these massive type of pumpkins kind of growing along the base of the mountain there. Maybe that's a food source, or maybe they're actually, you think they're a fruit, but they end up being like an egg, and then like creatures like pop out of these these things and then start like attacking. Maybe they're like some evil polyp of some kind, right? So you could always do that. That might be a nice touch to it. Maybe we could even put some of these even next to the green crystal if we wish. Why don't we do that? We'll decorate each section. Let's put one maybe right here. And what I might want to consider doing is maybe putting it like right here, along here. I don't want to block too much. Remember that rule about don't block too much room. See how this is really big, but it's in the back part. So your players won't have to worry about any kind of functionality problem with that, okay? Let's go ahead and add a couple more. Let's see here. Let's go with this small one right here. We're gonna go with variation. We have a big one. We have a small one. Let's put a medium one. We'll put it just right next to it, right there at the top. And then we can put another one maybe like right here in the back. So what we're doing is we're kind of framing the crystal a little bit, right? To where it's framed. We could make one more just like right there, and we'll make it extra small so that way there's not some inconsistency problem. And what we'll do is we'll put it in front of the crystal as well, so that way it's, or the vine, so that way it's kind of overlapping it and creating a little bit more detail. I think right here might work best. There we go. That looks good. I like that. So we're going to be decorating each section so that we've got those egg sacs or pumpkins or whatever in the green. We can add something different to each section, each area. I think that looks nice. Let's see here. Let's go place this here. Let's go ahead and maybe put some kind of flowers here. Let's type in flower. A couple options that we can work with. There's this nice flower bush right here. It's got the nice yellow color to it. The only thing with Fantasy Regional is there are shadows. If you look carefully when I do this, you'll see there's baked in shadows. And remember, I showed you that clipping mask trick. If you don't like the shadows, you can always take the clipping mask and put it on top of it. Now, the only issue with that is that wherever your grid is, it might cover up a portion of the grid, the clipping mask, right? So in the end, you're probably going to have to put the grid all the way up to the highest layer so that it's on top of everything. Because if you don't, then the clipping mask is going to hide the grid. Okay, well, yeah, let's go ahead and stick with, I kind of like the idea. What we could do is maybe have some things maybe growing off of the vine a little bit. So let's do this here. Let's go with crystal. And I'm not going to go with Fantasy Regional. I'm going to go with Fantasy Battle Maps. There are these crystals right here. These ones right here. Let's use, oh, is that gold? Yellow. Okay, let me type in yellow real quick. Do they have the original version for that already? Let me double check real quick. Oh, there's just that one. Okay, that's okay. We'll type the crystal back in and we'll use the blue ones. We're just going to have to find our way to work around that. That's all. That's all right. You guys kind of know the tricks now, how I get color to work right. You have to adjust the color adjustment settings to kind of get what you're looking for. That's kind of how it works. You bring the brightness up. When you try to get to yellows, you bring the brightness and the contrast. You bring the brightness down when you try to get reds. So we should be able to get yellow. The trick is just that we have to find green. And then once we get to green, we can get to that yellow part. So we'll kind of bump up the saturation. That looks good. I'm also going to change that blend mode to maybe